Hey everybody, Ryan slash Northernlion coming at you here with what I would consider to be my version of the Game of the Show Awards from PAX East 2013. A lot of people are going to know that I was away at PAX East 2013 this weekend. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the videos that went up in spite of the editing errors in some of them. But in any case, you should probably be familiar with other big sites that do, Game of the Show Awards at E3 where they honor the best stuff that they saw and played, preferably played, I guess, at these enormous conventions. So I figured I'd do my own kind of twist on things. I'm going to talk about 3 games that I feel were probably the most fun that I had at the show this year. This is going to be called the Best of PAX East 2013. There will probably be a Rest of PAX East 2013 as well, where I talk about everything that didn't quite make the cut, not necessarily saying, they're all bad, but this is what I've reserved for the games that really, really tickled my fancy while I was there. And I've got a couple of honorable mentions as well, which I don't feel necessarily qualified for the main list for reasons I'll talk about later, but still, I had an enjoyable time playing those and checking those out well at the convention. But without further ado, the first of the 3 games that I'm going to name among my best of PAX East 2013 is a game called Guacamelee. So this is an indie title coming at you from the guys at Drinkbox Studios. And a lot of people are going to be familiar with them for Tales from Space Mutant Blobs Attack. That was a game that came out originally PS3 or PSN, Vita, and eventually made its way to PC last year. Now, I wasn't all that keen on Tales from Space Mutant Blobs Attack. I really liked the art style, but there were some control issues. Guacamelee takes what I did like about that game, in particular, like the art style, and translates it into a formula that I'm very much more familiar with, and I feel is more conducive towards me liking the game, if that makes sense. This is a luchador, aka like Mexican wrestling-themed Metroidvania, and the Super Metroid elements run very, very strong in this one. The way it's an open-world game that is essentially designed to give you powers after you defeat bosses, or you can buy powers at certain stalls. And that will unlock new areas for you, or basically allow you to unlock new areas by kind of exploring the environment and finding places where these new powers eventually, or at least now, allow you to go. That's pretty much my definition of a Metroidvania. Let's talk specifically about Guacamelee. What I really like about this game is that it like dives in hard into this luchador aesthetic. A game like Super Metroid has the super ball that you can roll into, the super jump, the fast run, and stuff like that. Guacamelee has its own version of these powers. Like, instead of a ball, you actually turn into a chicken. And, instead of having, like, a super jump, you have, like, a special, wrestling-themed uppercut that you could use. There's also a combat system that is kind of quick-time eventy, but not in a bad way. It's a beat-em-up in its combat style. It's not dissimilar to something almost like, if you got hand-to-hand combat in Mark of the Ninja, and then you would have sometimes like an execution-style event where you'd move the analog stick or the D-pad, and it would execute them. It's kind of like that, only instead of executing them with like a sword, you're doing like a power bomb or a pile driver or something like that, which is really neat. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but the combat works totally fine. It's also got like a dimension switching mechanic, kind of similar to Outland, and actually there's a couple similarities to Outland, because Nick and I, Rock Lee Smile, as you may know him, played like 20 to 30 minutes, and the local co-op was actually awesome in this game. I hope I've kind of demonstrated or explained what makes this so good. Really, the thing that hooked me on this one the most was A, the art style, which is fantastic. It's really clean, colorful, looks good, and B, the kind of commitment to this very, very Metroid style open world design. They told us that the game has been speedrun in like an hour and a half or 2.5 hours, and for the normal person it takes around 6 to 8 for the first time through, which is really cool. It might have been 4 to 6 actually, don't quote me on that one yet. But yeah, I'm into that sort of like the games that can be kind of sequence broken, I guess. I'm into it watching it, at least. I'm usually not good enough to do it. But yeah, Guacamelee looks like a lot of fun. Both Nick and I agreed that it was one of the best games we played on the show floor, and that is coming later this year, originally to PSN and Vita, but they have not ruled out a PC release or other platforms later. Now, the second game that I would consider among my best of PAX East 2013 is a game that I actually played at PAX Prime 2012 as well, and this is Super Time Force from the guys at Cappy Games, who you are probably familiar with for a number of things, including, Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery EP, Critter Crunch. I'm trying to go back a little bit further, but that's good for now. Anyway, Super Time Force is basically, if you didn't hear me talk about it earlier, it's like Contra meets, I hesitate to say it, but it's Super Meat Boy if I had to put like a PR spin on it. It's basically a side-scrolling action shooter, again, similar to Contra, where you die in one hit, but death, instead of being kind of punishing, death is actually encouraged. There is a rewind time mechanic. So the way it works, you'll pick a character to start a level, you'll go through, you'll shoot enemies, each character has their own special abilities, and they're all kind of riffs on action stars or, cultural icons from 80s and 90s pop culture. In any case, you'll take a guy. Let's say you take Jean Rambeau, or Jean Rambois, who is the machine gun type archetype. Anyway, you go through, you're shooting dudes. Eventually, you get shot, you die in one hit. But then you can hold the B button on the Xbox 360 controller, which is the version that we were playing, because it is coming to Xbox Live Arcade exclusively, at least to start. Again, it's not been ruled out. But once you rewind time, the character that you played as originally now becomes a ghost that does exactly the same thing that you did in the level as you play through it with another character. So you could die with the machine gun guy, and then maybe you take out a rocket launcher character. I forget the name of the rocket launcher character, but in any case, so then the original character will run through the level, and he'll kill all the dudes, and you can just kind of run behind him and, take out the trash or, wipe up the stuff that he missed. And it creates these kind of weird strategies. It's weird to play a game like this where it's, side-scrolling Contra-like, not to bring the roguelike naming convention in here, where dying is actually encouraged, and that's why I talked about Super Meat Boy as well. You can die oftentimes, like many, many times over the course of a single playthrough, and still be able to beat the level, and in fact, sometimes it's borderline necessary. So what ended up happening as we played Super Time Force is like we'd fight against a boss, and maybe we'd start fighting the boss using like our shield dude, so we just have the shield guy basically like stand next to a turret, and the turret would fire at him, and he'd just block all of the bullets. Then after we died with him, we would take out like the rocket launcher guy, and we'd have the rocket launcher just fire at the boss while the shield guy is kind of protecting him by blocking the bullets. And then we die with the rocket launcher guy, rewind time, go with the machine gun guy, die, then have the sniper, die, and then eventually you'll have like 5 or 6 guys all kind of synergistically working together to defeat this boss. And, one of them is being actively played by you, but the other ones are just kind of replays of the lives that you had before. It's kind of a difficult game to explain. Believe it or not, it's actually a more difficult game to get into, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that for someone who's used to playing, Mega Man, Contra, Metal Slug, stuff like that, it's easy to jump into, but it's hard to kind of grasp the nuances of it. This is a game I'm very much looking to spending more time with in the future, but even in, with the limited amount of time that I've spent with it so far, including about the half hour at PAX East 2013 this year, this is definitely one of the games I was most excited about on the show floor, and I would consider it among my best of PAX East 2013. The final semi-official game that I would name among the best of PAX East 2013 is going to actually be a AAA title, and it was the first game Nick and I actually checked out as soon as we got onto the show floor, and this is The Last of Us. So obviously, this is a game that is kind of insanely hyped, and that's the reason we went to it when we actually had slightly early access to the convention center. And what I really like about The Last of Us is that it was a game on the show floor that was AAA, and it had a huge playable demo, basically, or a huge playable build. We got a half hour to spend with The Last of Us, which was awesome to kind of finally sink our teeth into this game that so many people are interested in. So The Last of Us, it's the new one from Naughty Dog. It's kind of a survival horror game, is maybe the easiest kind of genre moniker to throw it under. Basically, you're playing as this dude, and you have a posse of people around you, including a young lady as well as a child, and you're dealing with the fallout from this apocalypse. Now, the apocalypse is never explicitly stated, at least in the demo, but basically there are these zombies, for lack of a better word, that have been infected by this mind-controlling fungal parasite, essentially, and, it's the kind of thing where you're fighting the monsters, but also, supposedly you're also having to deal with, rebels or other people who are scavenging and just trying to survive. Other survivors, shall we say, is maybe better than rebels. In the demo that we played, we only had to fight monsters and do a little bit of scavenging and crafting, as well as platforming that definitely fit into that kind of like, Tomb Raider or perhaps more accurately Nathan Drake and Uncharted style. But the monsters were goddamn frightening. They're zombies, but they don't have vision. At least some of them don't. Instead, they're called clickers, and what they do is they kind of look around their environment using echolocation. So they'll just click around and make all these awful, horrifying noises. And instead of just trying to hide from view, which you do want to do, because there are enemies who have some vision and who are goddamn fast, you kind of want to use sound to your advantage. So you want to move silently, and you can basically get right next to them as long as you don't actually bump into them, and they won't know you're there. But if you make a noise, then you have a problem. So you do things like, tossing environmental objects like bottles around the room to kind of distract them and then move around them. You can also kill them if you so choose, but the enemies are not pushovers in this game, at least from what we played. And, if you deal with one enemy, you're probably going to be okay, provided you have ammo, and ammo is, pretty scarce. There is also a melee attack that you can use. But once you start getting mobbed by, 3 or 4 clickers or, infected, probably the best term, things are going to become exceptionally difficult for you. I died many times during my demo, and I watched Nick die many times during his as well. But, you know, there was some really cool stuff that you could do with the audio mechanic, if that makes sense. Like, you could try to group up a number of these clickers, like, all together, and by using, you know, tossing bottles or coins around the room and getting them to all go into the same location, and then try to take them out at the same time while they're kind of oblivious with maybe a crowd control weapon, like a Molotov cocktail or something like that. Again, these, you know, Molotov cocktails, it's not like you just open a crate most of the time and there's a Molotov cocktail there. You'll find recipes, and you'll also find crafting ingredients in the world that you can use to create this stuff. It's a superficial crafting system to a certain extent. At least from the little bit that we saw, it wasn't like, you know, you don't have like a Minecraft style crafting table or anything like that where you're drafting up plans. It's more of just like, you have this, this, and this. Would you like to make this? How many? But it's still, it was really cool. It was definitely the most impressed I was with the AAA game on the show floor this year. At least a playable AAA game. And I will say it looked a little rough around the edges. I think it might be, well, it was a pre-alpha build, but it might also be that the PS3 is just kind of showing its age, especially after playing something like Tomb Raider on PC, which looked really, really good. The Last of Us, you know, some motion blur, looked a little jaggy. I watched things kind of pop in, like bushes and stuff like that. It still looks visually impressive from an artistic standpoint, but on a technical level, it wasn't totally there. But, you know, there's still some time before the game actually comes out, and I very much enjoyed my time with The Last of Us on the show floor. Now, let's talk about a couple of honorable mentions. So, Guacamelee, Super Time Force, and The Last of Us made for a really nice holy trinity of Best of PAX East 2013, but there's a couple of honorable mentions here. And the reason I've excluded this first honorable mention from the quote-unquote official list is because it's not a standalone game, it is just DLC. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention how impressed I was with the Mark of the Ninja Special Edition DLC. So we stopped by the Clay booth on the first day. Actually, almost everything that we saw here was on the first day, which made for a pretty awesome Friday. But in any case, we stopped by the Clay booth, and I was talking to Nels, the lead designer on Mark of the Ninja, while I was playing through the Special Edition DLC, which is coming later this year for Steam and Xbox Live Arcade. And I think, you know, it shouldn't surprise me, but that dude really has a good head on his shoulders with what to do with Mark of the Ninja now that it has become so critically successful. Basically, the Mark of the Ninja Special Edition DLC is not only, you know, it's not tacking on just like extra costumes or something like that, or, you know, a couple extra like VR mission type levels or something like that. This is, as he describes it, like the Criterion Collection. So kind of like the director's cut, if you will, addition to Mark of the Ninja. So what this includes is a new playable character who basically manifests himself as a playable path or loadout later in the game. So every loadout has its own unique style. The unique element of this loadout is that there is a non-lethal takedown. So enemies, you can knock them out, but then if other enemies come back and kind of like, you know, shake them or slap them on the face, then they'll wake up, so you've got to be a little bit more careful about your positioning. Included with this is also a prologue chapter, which he assured me is quite long and difficult as well. What I played of the prologue chapter was on par maybe with some of the later levels in the game. It's been a while since I played Mark of the Ninja, at least like 3 or 4 months. But I was having some trouble. I was definitely dying and not just, you know, like speed running the level. But yeah, it seems like really cool content, and perhaps the addition I'm most excited for, and I think fans of Mark of the Ninja will be most excited for, is that they have basically gone through the game and just added a number of spots in the game where there's developer commentary. So if you want to play with developer commentary on, you know, if you played like 30 Flights of Loving, there's that in the game as well, where you can just kind of like press E next to an object in the world and you'll get a little story about the development of the game. That's going to be like all throughout Mark of the Ninja, which looks awesome to me. As someone who's a big fan of that game, and I played it through twice, this definitely looks like DLC that I will be jumping back into to play through the game again. If not only to experience the developer's commentary, but also to check out how this path that has a non-lethal takedown changes the playstyle over the course of the game as well. So, you know, Mark of the Ninja Special Edition DLC, currently not priced and dated for sometime this summer. I believe it's going to have a like simultaneous release on Steam and Xbox Live Arcade, but, you know, those things can vary. They're all still up in the air. But I was very impressed with it, and I think people who love Mark of the Ninja will love that as well. The other thing, the last honorable mention that I have, and this one was excluded from the, again, quote-unquote official list because it wasn't playable, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, is Saints Row 4, which had probably the most insane video demo I've ever seen in my entire life. A lot of it was fan service, but I'll be damned if I didn't enjoy the hell out of it regardless. Basically, you know, I played a little bit of Saints Row 3, probably like 5 or 6 hours, predominantly co-op. But, you know, I was into it. I'm totally down with that kind of absurdity that those guys are doing over at Volition. But we were talking on Friday. We're like, what could they possibly do in Saints Row 4 to make it crazier than Saints Row 3? Well, basically everything I could have possibly imagined. They blew my expectations out of the water. First, you're not just playing as the Saints anymore. You are literally, well, I mean, you're playing as the Saints, but the Saint you're playing as has become the official president of the United States, which I think opens up a lot of hilarious narrative possibilities. I'm just spitballing here, but I would love to see like a presidential debate mission where you just, I don't know, get up on stage and beat the shit out of the other guy and the crowd goes wild. Again, that's not them saying that. That's me saying that. You're playing as the president of the United States. You get kidnapped in an alien invasion. You're going to be fighting aliens. On top of that, you also exist in like a virtual construct of Steelport, which kind of allows you to do some crazy stuff. There's all sorts of new vehicles and weapons in the game, like a dubstep gun, and you can, you know, reskin your weapons. Dubstep gun, by the way, it shoots dubstep. People just freak out and dance and then fall over dead. Vehicles also are affected. What was the other thing that I was just going to talk about? Oh, you can reskin your weapon. So, you know, if you have a rocket launcher, you can put it in a guitar case like Desperado or like the Super Scope, the Super Nintendo light gun kind of peripheral. You can skin it like that. But the big thing here, the big mechanical change, is that they're going to have superpowers in the game. So essentially, when he just jumped up in the air and started to fly in the demo, we were all like, oh, okay. So this is basically like you've taken not only Saints Row 4, but then you've lumped in Crackdown as well. And it may be a little bit of Infamous and Prototype as well. It's basically like every non-GTA open world game that has come out over the course of this generation. And it looks like it's integrated fantastically. So not only do you have, you know, the guns, the crazy vehicles, all the other absurdity in Saints Row 4, but now you will also have superpowers that you earn over the course of the game, like flying, you know, jumping, many stories into the air. And by many, I mean like 50. You can jump over to the top of buildings. You can shoot like ice balls out of your hands or freeze rays out of your hands that will just like leave enemies in place, and then you can shatter them. You can freeze vehicles and then kind of slide them around. It looks absolutely batshit insane in the best way possible. So I was really impressed with the Saints Row 4 demo as kind of like the natural evolution of Saints Row 3. I have no idea where they'll go for Saints Row 5. We're getting ahead of ourselves, obviously, here. But I, you know, enjoyed that presentation a great deal, as did everyone in the room. But it's not quite best of PAX East 2013. Because it wasn't playable. It was just a video demo. But in any case, yes, count me among the people who are, not ironically, but unabashedly excited for Saints Row 4. It's crazy, it's absurd, and, you know, I don't take myself that seriously, so I can totally get into that stuff. So again, my best of PAX East 2013 for playable stuff, playable standalone games anyway. Guacamelee from Dreambox Studios, coming later this year on PSN and Vita. Super Time Force from Cappy, coming later this year on Xbox Live Arcade, and who knows what else. The Last of Us, coming later this year on PS3. And in terms of honorable mentions, I guess, for lack of a better word, Mark of the Ninja Special Edition DLC is definitely on there, as well as Saints Row 4, coming to probably every platform, I believe, later this October. But again, thank you guys for watching. There should be some more PAX East coverage coming this week. I'm probably going to do some sort of cast with Josh and Nick, because we saw a lot of these games together. And in any case, keep an eye out for the rest of PAX East 2013, in which I promise I will not talk about every game for 5 minutes each. It'll be a little bit quicker. Again, in any case, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.